So it's now October. After my boss had tossed Rat Boy out on his heels like an unwanted vagrant from a tavern, I hadn't seen much of him. I also had to make sure to get my phone number changed as he tried to blow up my phone with calls and text messages, trying to convince me that I owed him some sort of apology for assaulting him and humiliating him when he grabbed me and tried to kiss me in front of my boss without so much as a word. I, of course, didn't answer any of his calls or respond to any of his text messages he sent me prior to changing my number. If you say nothing, there are no words to twist in your enemy's favor, and silence can often cut deeper than any blade when someone is seeking emotional validation. Did I mention that my uncle was a lawyer? Moving on. Halloween was approaching, and my good friend Kat had something really special planned for us. I had known Kat since elementary school, and she worked across town reading tarot cards to people in this new age Wicca shop. Kat had broken up with her high school sweetheart some months ago and started dating a new guy who had wandered into her shop, and the cards had told her that despite appearances, this man would bring her great surprises. Yami Yugi, where were you when I needed you? Kat also never used the guy's real name because she didn't like it. But then again, Kat never liked anyone's real name. Kat preferred to assign people chosen names based off of what she saw in their auras. This is important for later. Anyway, being a devoted college student, I didn't have much time between working and going to school. I barely had any time to talk to my friends. Also, sadly, my long-standing role-playing group still had members that were in boot camp, so I was seriously craving a role-playing fix. So when Kat called me up a couple of weeks before Halloween and invited me to hang out with her, her new boyfriend, and a couple of other people and do a role-playing session in costume on Halloween night, I did not say no. Kat suggested we dress up as hot vampires, complete with corsets, heels, capes, fake fangs, and not the cheap kind either. I opted instead of heels for boots because, well, I don't like heels, and I'm too afraid of breaking my ankles. I asked Kat if I needed to roll up a character or bring anything, and she said no, her boyfriend would take care of everything. All we need to do was dress up and show up. Her older sister, who was a rebel with a cause, offered to drive us both there and drop us off, so we could drink beforehand. That's right, folks, I had finally turned 21, so drinking was on. However, grave lessons would be learned this night. So, on Halloween evening, I drove myself to Kat's house. We ate dinner, tied ourselves in those corsets, put those fangs in, got all dressed up into hot vampires, drank ourselves a few drinks until we were nice and ready, all the while Kat messaging and texting her boyfriend on our progress. Then we got into her sister's car and she drove us to his house. The house itself was pretty unassuming, a one-story ranch-style building with the porch light on. Kat led me in by the hand. The door was open, and the place was decked out for Halloween. She opened up a door and took us downstairs to the basement. It was lit by candles and black lights. There was a wooden table and chairs, 3 of them empty, one which looked fancy, and 2 people already sitting at the table who turned around as we staggered down the steps. Sitting on one side was a guy, scrawny with fake elf ears glued haphazardly to his head in a cape and cowl. He screamed edgelord. At the other end of the table sat another guy, rather round and appearing to be as if he was doing his best to squeeze himself into football gear that had been covered in foam to look like armor. A bag of Cheetos in hand and a 2-liter of Mountain Dew on the table. 4 other bags and bottles next to him. Edgelord and Cheetos both greeted us with whistles and haze as Kat dragged me around the table and sat me down with her, sitting next to the empty, fancy chair at the head of the table. Kat obviously knew who these guys were, so she introduced us as I made pleasantries. Cheetos had a habit of talking while he ate. Edgelord was pretty much, well, brooding. Kat got up and got us a few beers from the beer fridge on one side of the basement and took her seat next to me again. Just as I was about to ask where our host was, the door of the basement opened and shut. Then there was the unmistakable sound of creaking from the wooden stairs as someone began to walk down it. All conversation stopped as we looked up at the steps, and from the top of the edge, like Pennywise the clown peering around the edge of sewer pipes, was the face of Rat Boy. I blinked and did a double take. For a split second, I questioned just how drunk was I, or perhaps what Cat and her sister may have put in my drink. Perhaps it was a trick of the light. Then his beady eyes focused on me, and a twisted smile spread across his face as he said my name and welcomed me to his home. Instantly, my heart stopped, and my blood ran cold in my skin as he started coming down the steps, and I became completely still in my chair. I swear I just turned sober. I couldn't believe it. Somehow, my friend had started dating Rat Boy without me knowing, and he planned for her to bring me here, to his basement, on Halloween night, dressed as a hot vampire. Suddenly, I realized how dire my situation was. I was drunk, in a room with at least 2 men I didn't know and a third I despised. There was a table, steps, and a door between me and the front door, and I was stuck in the basement. I had no vehicle by which to leave the premises. My stupid costume would limit my ability to be able to fight if I needed to, but at least I had gone with boots. However, being around 3 potential assailants in my condition, I couldn't deny. I was trapped. Rat Boy was dressed as a Victorian gentleman. Think something from Interview with a Vampire, and when he sat down at the head of the table, Cat threw herself onto him with a drunken, girly coo. Then they began to passionately French kiss, and for a moment, his eyes looked over at me, and I nearly vomited as I looked away. I then noticed Cheetos was staring at them with rapt eyes, furiously shoving food into his mouth, while Edgelord was staring at me like a piece of meat from under his hood. I remember grasping a hold of my beer bottle next to me, thinking I was going to have to start smashing heads with it. My heart lifted for a moment. A weapon. Irish women can be dangerous with glass bottles, laddies. Cat finally removed herself from Rat Boy and sat back in her chair. They both stared at me, and I stared daggers back at them. Sadly, Cat didn't know about my run-in with Rat Boy because I had never told her about him. I tend to not air out my dirty laundry, and I'm certain he hadn't told her a thing. Cat, however, won't hesitate to tell you her life story, and judging by the twinkle in Rat Boy's beady eyes, he had planned this whole thing. He wanted me, now he had me, and it looked like I have no choice but to go along. With smug pride filling him as he had Cat go get him a drink, Rat Boy started handing out character sheets and began explaining that for tonight's Grizzly session, we would be playing a bout of Ravenloft. Oh joy, I thought to myself, as if things couldn't get any better. As he slid the character sheet to me, I began looking it over. Rat Boy had made me a female elf with a detailed physical description that would bring pleasure to any teenage boy. He even drew a picture, and no, I won't describe it because I'm still drinking to forget it. No surprise there. Then my eyes roved to the class slot and my heart stopped again. Rat Boy had made me a paladin in Ravenloft. For those of you that don't know, being a paladin in Ravenloft is asking for death. In a world where dark powers control everything and there's basically no good anywhere, being a paladin is not only unheard of, it's suicide. In addition to that, he made me a paladin of Set, and the only weapons that I had was a short sword and a small, round, wooden shield. Oh, and plate bikini armor, because that's all the protection I obviously need. And my summoned mount was a pony. Were I not so interested in keeping my wits, I would have kept drinking simply due to the cringe that was on that character sheet. Cat was made a sorceress, Edgelord was our rogue, and Cheetos was our barbarian. Thus, the travesty of the adventure began. Our quest was to stop some big bad vampire lord who was stealing away the young, beautiful women of local towns and villages to have his way with them. As we went on, of course, witnessing untold horrors, being exposed to awful things, fighting monsters, madness, corruption, and in some cases each other, Rat Boy seemed to do his best to make sure his beloved cat was treated well. He let her re-roll when she rolled badly. Oh no, that clearly hit the edge or something. Oh wait, no, she succeeds because of her sorcerer race special power. Cat also had the best gear, weapons, and all the loot, despite her not being very good at role-playing. Considering how drunk she was, I was surprised that she was able to make her character do anything. Edgelord was a constant pain as he kept failing his saves and getting into madness and then stabbing himself or someone else, causing me to use all my healing abilities to repair the self-harm, instead of being able to use them while we were actually in battle, causing Cheetos to be angry at me when I couldn't heal him. Meanwhile, Cheetos had the same intelligence as his character and wanted to smash everything. And when I say smash, that means physically assault and have his way with just about every person we came across if they caught his fancy interchangeably. Edgelord was able to slightly reel in his behavior with threatening to stab Cheetos if he didn't keep his pants on. All the while, Rat Boy is sitting there in his chair looking like Emperor Palpatine, templing his fingers while the party gives in to anger. Yet, Rat Boy went out of his way to try and make sure that I suffered the most. However, my dice refused to betray me. The one smart thing I did that night was bring my own dice to the session, and I brought out my special set. I've reserved this set only for special occasions so as not to ruin the luck of the dice. Thankfully, the dice, or the gods of RP, took pity on me this hollow night and blessed me with their favor. Whenever I had to roll a save for any reason, my dice always came through, much to Rat Boy's displeasure, and I always made sure to roll them where he could see it. When Rat Boy realized that my dice were on my side, he tried to insist that I use his dice, which I of course refused. He tried to claim that they were rigged or weighted. Fortunately, Cat backed me up that they weren't. He then started making rolls behind his screen and making up excuses that I somehow failed my saves even though I rolled max amounts on my dice and in previous cases they had succeeded. Rat Boy even destroyed my wooden shield, which I had somehow turned into an awesome instrument of defense. Rest in peace, little shield. You didn't deserve to be snood to death by Cheetos. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. Then it happened. Somehow, the party had managed to stay alive long enough to get to the vampire's castle to face off against them for the final showdown. But, as with most things in Ravenloft, we were not a match for this pariah of evil. Quite consumed with the horrors he'd witnessed and been through, the edgelord went completely insane and killed himself right in the middle of the battle. Cheetos was literally stricken with blind and deaf, then, despite being cured, stupidly charged off the edge of the tower to his death on the spikes of the castle gates below. That left Cat's sorceress and my bikini paladin. The vampire lord then cast Enthrall, I believe that's what it was, on both of us, and we rolled saves. Cat rolled a critical fail, and I picked up my dice and tossed them onto the table, and rolled a max save. There was a fire of hope in my soul as everyone at the table grew dead silent, and then Rat Boy spoke. You fail. Excuse me, what? I glared at him. There's no way! I fail with a natural save? But Rat Boy wasn't listening. He then began to describe how both our characters go limp. Our weapons drop from our hands, and we submit to the vampire lord's will. Two unclothed vampire women come over and place collars with chains around our necks, and then hand the chains to their masters as he begins to pull us toward his bed chamber. Obviously more stuff happened, but we're not going to go into that. Stop! I screamed as I slammed both my hands on the table and stared at Rat Boy. Cheetos dropped the bag that was in his hand. The hood of the edgelord actually fell back away from his head. Cat looked up at me in fear because she knew what was coming. And Rat Boy looked at me confused. "What's wrong, OP? Why did you interrupt my narration?" Rat Boy said. What is your problem?" "Are you telling me that you are about to take my character back into a room and forcibly have your way with her after I just rolled a natural save to resist your horrible vampire's enthrall spell?" I cried angrily. "It's not forceful. You're under his power. You're consenting willingly." "No!" I shook my head. "I don't consent to this. I would never consent to this." "You don't get a choice. You're enthralled," Rat Boy shouted back. "It's no big deal." "I'm a virgin, you jerk!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. Time seemed to stop, and I realized everyone was staring at me. Also, that's right, I was 21 and had never done it before. Not because I was unattractive or I didn't have guys who wanted me. Truth is, I was simply too afraid. And now everyone in this room, including Rat Boy, knew my awful secret. Now, I knew I couldn't stay in this basement. Besides, the session was pretty much over. So I grabbed my dice, threw them in my purse, stormed out of the basement and the house, and out onto the street. I just started walking. I had no idea what time it was. I was still dressed as a hot vampire, walking down some street in the middle of nowhere, crying, fumbling for my phone, thinking who I could call. As I reached for my phone, I realized I was crying too hard to really be able to talk to anyone, so I just clutched it in my hands as I kept walking. I cried hard, berating myself for being so stupid to not have asked the right questions to avoid this, to have put me in this kind of situation. I was so afraid of what might happen to me now that I was alone. Fortunately, I reached a 24-hour fast food joint without an incident, cleaned up my face, walked in, called my roommate, and he was nice enough to come get me. Thank goodness he worked the third shift. He drove me to Cat's house to get my car, and we went home. I was never more happy to be safely home in my bed. After I got home, I realized that Cat didn't come running after me, which surprised me. A few days later, she came to talk to me in the game shop. She told me she had tried to follow me out, but Rat Boy had stopped her, and said that his behavior had been really strange after I left, throwing the other players out and then instantly making moves on her once they were gone. I told her about my first encounter with him, and she finally put the dots together, revealing how he had set everything up to bring me there that night and used her to get to me. Much later, Cat did another tarot card reading and decided to break up with Rat Boy after what the cards had told her. While I have never asked Cat to do a card reading for me, as I don't like to tempt fate, Cat did one for me anyway, as she worries about people she cares about. And she warned me that I would have one more run-in with him, but he would receive back what he had done to me threefold. I said, yeah, okay, thanks, as I didn't believe in the card stuff. But those Skavens are a tricky lot. See you in the next one. So yeah, that was a doozy. I'm surprised that Rat Boy was able to orchestrate this whole thing and even got her to do everything that she said she wasn't going to do. That's one master chess player. So what did you guys think of the story?